Alrighty, so thank you all for being here this morning. We are super excited to get started with the Supply Chain Emerging Tech Conference. My name is Vanessa Gambini. I'm a VP for SCM, and then I've got Shivani Yoshi, our president here, as well as other team members that helped out with making this wonderful event. So thank you to everyone that helped volunteer your time to contact speakers and just to help organize and coordinate the logistics for today. So I also want to thank Professor Ramesh. He's been incredibly supportive the whole process and has just been so incredible to work with. So thank you, Ramesh, for everything that you've done. We've got an exciting lineup for today, so I'll briefly go through the agenda for you guys. So right at 9:15, we've got our keynote speaker, Klaus from Germany. He's live streaming in today just to speak with the students about one of the supply chain emerging topics. Then we'll have the dean do a quick welcome address. We will then move on to our first panel on using AI and intelligent automation in supply chain. We'll have a small little break for you guys to get some coffee, use the restroom, and then come back for our next panel on autonomous trucks. Then we'll move on into lunch and some more networking with some of the speakers and all the attendees here today. And then starting at 1 o'clock, we'll go ahead and do an emerging field of healthcare supply chain panel for you guys, followed by the bringing IoT in supply chain. We'll do a quick break after that, and then end with our blockchain transforming supply chain panel as well, and do some closing remarks for today. So hopefully you guys can hang out all day today. We'll be doing snacks and food, but we're so happy you're here. And one of the reasons we're doing this event for you guys is we're really excited to bring students into the supply chain knowledge base. We really want to bring a platform where you guys can learn from leaders in the field and also use this to apply it in your classrooms, in your conversations with family and friends. Supply chain is really cool, and we're doing some great stuff in supply chain. So today we're going to learn about how cool it is and some things you can use in conversations, whether it's interviews or just day to day. But without further ado, I'd like to present to you Klaus. So Klaus is the VP of Innovation and Trends with DHL. He's been heading the DHL Europe Innovation Center in Germany, as well as the global trend research activities, driving thought leadership and customer-facing innovations for the past 10 years. He's been working with DHL in various capacities, from strategy to development, and has experienced various stages of digital transformation in the industry. So with his wealth of experience, Shivani, with his wealth of experience, he's just been able to inspire professionals and students in the supply chain industry and innovative conferences. So without further ado, I'll let Klaus go ahead and get started with his presentation and his introduction to you guys. If Klaus, you want to add anything.
Thank you so much, and a good morning from freezing Germany. I'm really happy and honored to be with you today. Ramesh, thanks for having me, and looking at the agenda, I think you have a great day ahead. And if I got that right, you just heard that supply chains are cool, or supply chain management is cool. I can fully support and echo that, and maybe also my presentation today, adds a bit to that as an argument. What I'd love to share with you today is our views on the supply chains of the future, and I also want to share how we are approaching the topic of trends and innovation and driving these topics further into our organization, and of course also towards our customers. Looking at your agenda, you have basically all the top topics that I would have listed on the agenda, with AI and autonomy and IoT and blockchain and others. So I hope that's going to be a good starting point for the coming discussions of the day for you. But let me start with looking a bit back. Still no presentation without COVID these days. What we've seen as people working in supply chain management, that with COVID, the topic of supply chain became so much more present in the broader public, but also for our customers. And you see these headlines here. I love the middle one that says supply chain management as a strategic differentiator, and I will elaborate on that a bit. So we've seen the importance of supply chains becoming much more obvious, not only with vaccine distribution. Of course, this was very important. DHL alone moved more than 2 billion doses of vaccines, but also in other areas. In Germany, it was toilet paper. I know it was pasta in Italy and other stuff in other countries. I also love that quote that you see from Professor Richard Wilding. Some refer to him as the supply chain guru, and he says, in the new normal, if your supply chain is the same as the one that you had pre-COVID, you're probably doing something wrong. So what this means is we will see, and we already can see, a lot of change in supply chains for the better, and supply chains becoming much more prominent. Together with Professor Wilding, very early during lockdown still, I did a study looking into supply chains and how they will recover. As everything I'm talking today in terms of thought leadership, this is publicly available on dhl.com, so feel free to have a look. I think it's still relevant. And you see the main findings of that paper on the slide here as well. And the first one for me is maybe the most important one. It says, supply chains will change, they will be reshaped, and there's a portfolio of purposes. So what you have to keep in mind is that for decades, supply chain management and logistics was basically only about two things: price and quality. But now we see there's so much more purposes of a supply chain, and the supply chain, contributing to strategic topics, and even to the value of the company. And it's topics that are top of the list for any major company, like sustainability, like customer centricity, customer experience, all of that. So this portfolio of objectives that can be served by a supply chain is increasing, and with this, the area of opportunities is growing big time. And you see on the other points, more or less, like going into more details. We will see changes in how networks and transportation flows are being set up, also how warehouses are being set up. And you only think of e-commerce and the speed that is needed for that. We're talking same day, we're talking same hour. For some offers, so also warehousing and where you put your inventory becomes even more important. As an innovation guy, I have to say that yes, innovation will be essential, and we'll go into that, but also collaboration will be really important. So these supply chains, given this increasing complexity, will not work in silos. They only work with collaboration along the entire supply chain. I'm not only talking logistics, the entire supply chain. So in summary, we see the supply chain transformation, and we see this focus shifting from cost and quality, as I said, to value. Or others might put it in a way saying supply chain management and logistics have reached the boardroom. So we see board positions in major companies being responsible for supply chain. This was not the case, not even 5 years ago. So how will these supply chains of the future look like? I brought 5 attributes that I feel are important when characterizing a supply chain of the future. And maybe this is something you want to keep in mind in the course of today when you have your discussions, when you ask your questions like, is this what we are discussing actually contributing to these attributes of the supply chain? I go through the 5 very quickly, and then I have examples also on each and every one. So first of all, is supply chains will be connected. And if you look at the sheer numbers of sensors that are out there and will be out there, we're talking billions of sensors. There was an assumption that in 2020 we had roughly like 9 billion sensors in the world. This number will increase to 25 billion in 2030, and maybe even beyond. And if you don't see this in the B2B world, you certainly see this in your private life, the sensors being in your iPhones or other devices. And if you just want to check yourself how many sensors currently are around you, you might have a smartwatch, a wristband, you have your phone with you, maybe an AirTag, and so on and so forth. So these devices are just an indicator now of how much more connectedness is possible and needed. Second one, I think it's not a surprise, supply chains will be data-driven. The data generated in supply chain has always been huge, but the utilization of that data has, for different reasons, been quite low in the past. But now with big data analytics, with artificial intelligence, we will see this really developing at an enormous speed. The market for big data analytics in logistics will triple between 2020, that's the baseline, and 2026. So in 6 years, we see a tripling market here. Next one, automated. So of course, automation is a big topic in logistics, as everywhere when you look into robotics and automation. And of course, this drives efficiency, this drives quality. I have an example for that as well. But I also want to highlight that currently, you cannot assume that supply chain operations are automated. So we did a study together with IBM, I think 2 or 3 years ago, where we figured that 80% of all processes in logistics are manual, 80%. And only 5% of all warehouses globally, not ours, in general, globally, are fully automated. So you might see videos on YouTube or wherever, with fully automated warehouses and, hundreds of robots driving around. Yes, they are there, but they are not there at scale. So there's huge potential in automation. Next one, sustainability. Really important topic for us as a company as well. So our objective is to become net zero with our emissions by 2050, which is a huge task, given especially our air freight and express activities with the airplanes around. I'll come to that. So 14% of the greenhouse gases of this world are produced by transportation. But the good news is that we know, we did an analysis on that, more than 50% of our customers ask for the topic of sustainability in their tenders. So when they ask for solutions from us, more than half of the customers already ask for sustainability. So big topic and a big lever in general for the world, looking into transportation and logistics when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions reduction. And then last, not least, supply chains of the future will be customer-centric, much more customer-centric as they are today. So customer centricity in the past more or less means, okay, move that shipment to the customer on time without damage. But now with the changing requirements from customers, in terms of also the customer experience, supply chains need to deliver, literally deliver that customer experience. And this one example is in the omni-channel concepts, that customers are asking for, buying something online, picking it up in the store, returning it somewhere else, just for convenience reasons, right? And don't be mistaken, this is of course happening in the B2C world. But everything you see in the B2C world is being transferred to the B2B world. Why is this? It's quite simple, because it's human beings. That consumer that is having a great customer experience when ordering online on a Sunday afternoon on his sofa, wants to have the same experience when he's the logistics manager on a Monday morning in his company. So there's no need to distinguish between B2B and B2C. Customer centricity is everywhere. All right, so let me share a bit how we as DHL and as DHL Innovation and Trend Research team, how we look into these supply chains of the future in more detail, and also then share a bit, as I said, of projects we're doing. So as a disclaimer, I don't have the crystal ball. If I had it, I probably would not talk to you today. I don't have that crystal ball. Trend research is a risky business, and this includes being wrong somewhere. I think our track record from the past is quite good. I was asked this on a panel the other day, where we were wrong in the past, and my answer to that was that I think we were not wrong when it came to identifying the right topics. But we have several examples where we were significantly wrong on the timing of these. So either the topics, picked up much faster than we expected or slower. So the timing to get that right is much harder than identifying the topic. So that's my disclaimer. The way we approach trend research and we approach innovation is based on the core belief that we have to be close to our customers, close to technology, and close to operations. And the three have to come together. So for us, it is of course really, really important to understand from our customers, that's mainly B2B customers, big companies, understand from them what are their strategic priorities, where are their pain points, where are they heading with their service or product offering, and of course how we can support them being successful with that, or supporting from the supply chain and logistics perspective. So being close to customers, clearly important. But also being close to technology is important for us. So that's why we do startup scouting, we do startup pitches, startup events, and so on and so forth. And we also talk to the big technology providers, because it is important for us to see what is possible, what is out there maybe in other industry that has not been applied yet to logistics. So important for us to understand as well. And then third, we have to be close to operations. We cannot sit in an ivory tower and just expect, if we come up with something smart, the entire organization goes crazy and implements that. That's not the case. So we have to understand, what are the pain points, the challenges, and also what is the direction of the colleagues on the ground in our operations, warehouses, hubs, distribution centers, and how we can support with that. And if the three play together, we can be successful, and I think we are to a certain degree. Ask you to focus on this bottom box where it says 400 plus projects and a 50% success rate. And the 50% success rate is not because we are just genius in running projects. The 50% success rate is because we understand those three areas: customers, technology, and operations. And we only go for the projects where we know there's a need, there's a demand, and there's also the possibility from a technology side. We only go for these, and then with this you increase the success rate. And then, this is all being fed in a typical innovation funnel. So this thought leadership trend research part is what I just outlined. Whenever possible, we want to make things tangible, technology concepts tangible. That's why we run these proof of concept projects. Quite a number. I think my team is currently running, like, depending on the definition, like 40 or so in parallel. And then whenever possible, of course, we want to make this a product. We want to scale this. We do this by handing it over typically to one of our divisions, because they are at the core of our operations, and they have to buy into it, and then they scale it. We also have centers of excellence for automation and robotics, for example, for IoT, for blockchain. They are also responsible to scale that. So my team is rather focused on the front end of that funnel. That's a bit more the playground of things. And there are places where this all happens, and these are our 4 innovation centers. As it was said in the beginning, I'm leading the European Innovation Center in Germany. We established this innovation center 15 years ago, so that's quite established. And over time, we built also centers, as you can see on the slide, around the world, starting in Singapore, then Chicago, and just 1 year ago, pretty much 1 year ago, one in Dubai. And this is the place where we bring together our customers. We invite our customers for workshops, for strategic discussions. We bring in our experts, we bring in technology experts, startups, technology provider, and there, these 3 elements come together. To give you an idea on, what is happening there, in my center alone for this year, we will probably do more than 300 customer workshops or innovation center tours. So we have a sizable number of visitors every year, and this is the basis. This is where we learn. And it's not where we present our solutions, but where we ask our customers or our partners to open up and engage with us and exchange. So much more in listening mode than in presentation mode. And we have a tool to show all of this, to show what we've learned from our customers, partners, and also from our research. And that's the DHL Logistics Trend Radar. It was established pretty much 10 years ago. The current version is version 5, so more or less we publish this every other year. And you see on this in this video how these trends developed over time. But I also have the static radar to explain a bit more what this is all about. So first of all, the radar has two sides, two halves, the left-hand and the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, you see the social and business trends. And on the right-hand side, you see the technology trends. We feel it's very important to have these two categories because there's a natural tendency to jump on the technology trends, to come from the technology side. That's not wrong, but it's only half of the truth. It's equally important to look at these social and business trends, that's strategies, societal movements, and these kind of things. It's equally important also to understand these, and that's why we have the two parts. On this radar, you currently see 29 trends, and they are organized by their impact on logistics and also by the timeline. So in the outer part of the radar, that's a 10-year time frame we're looking at, and the closer a trend moves towards this red dot, which is basically today, the closer it is to reality. I circled the trends that in one way or the other I will cover very briefly in my examples today. I invite you to also have a look at this. As I said, we share everything in a very open way because we truly believe that this is the driver for collaboration and opens up discussion. So feel free to have a look at it. It is a bit sad because just today we defined or submitted the final version of the next logistics trend radar. So I know how this one will look like, but unfortunately I cannot share with you that one today. What I can share with you, we have more trends on the radar. We'll see 40 trends being covered by the trend radar. The global launch will be on October 25. You can use that QR code to pre-register, not to miss that. But cannot disclose it today, unfortunately, because there will be global press conference, global press release, and so on, and we have to keep it as a secret. But Ramesh, I'm happy to come back, or one of my team members at one point, to come back and also talk about version 6 of the trend radar. All right. As I said, a few examples. Try to speed it up a bit because I want to allow for some questions as well. A few examples on projects we are running as a group along these areas or these attributes of the supply chain of the future, starting with connected. I think 2 years ago, we started to build the first digital twin of a warehouse, I think, ever. I'm not aware of any other. So this is a warehouse we run for a customer, the customer Tetra Pak in Singapore, and we built a digital twin, so a digital representation of the physical object. That's what a digital twin is all about for that warehouse. And it's a great example for connected because the digital twin is only the place where it all comes together. Sensors on assets, on people, on shipments and products. And with this digital twin, you get a comprehensive view on what is happening with all the opportunities that come with it. Of course, on optimization, on running scenarios, on looking into exceptions, and so on and so forth. So I'm a big believer in the digital twin concept in general. It doesn't have to be an entire warehouse. It can also be parts of processes. We also did a trend report recently on digital twins in logistics. You'll find it on dhl.com. I'm a big believer, and I think having an entire warehouse as a digital twin is only one step. The bigger step is at one point we will see digital twins of entire supply chains. Yeah, this is not there yet, but if we reach that point, then we will reach a completely different level of visibility, transparency, and also opportunity in terms of efficiently managing these. Second one, also going a bit into the IoT topic that you have later on the agenda as well. So tracking shipments with IoT devices is really important for us. And this became very prominent with COVID and the vaccine distribution because what was required there was a temperature controlled shipment. And you need sensors to ensure that this temperature always stayed in the range required. And that's why our IoT team in the Innovation Center was very busy during this vaccine distribution phase and still is to a certain degree. The example I brought here today is a bit looking into the future, and this is what we call a smart label. This is still in the testing phase. It's not there yet, but you see the sticky label on this yellow parcel in the left picture. And it is truly a smart label for various reasons. There are a number of sensors in that label. There's a GSM module in that label, and there's a battery in that label. So this label actively can send location data at every given point in time, to a central IoT platform, and then provides visibility. The cool story about that is that everything on that label and in that label is being printed. So it's not only the text on the paper that's being printed, but it has a printed battery, a printed GSM module, a printed GPS module. And this is the future of labeling. Price-wise, not there yet, not being produced at scale, but for sure, smart labels will make a difference also in these, high volume shipments like in the express or in the parcel world. What you also see that this label goes around the edge of the parcel. And what it does is once this edge is being destroyed, like you open the box, also then the label sends a signal indicating that someone opened that parcel. Also really important when you think of concepts like vendor managed inventory, for example, or of course very high value goods, to have this proof point that it's been opened. And by the way, this even plays into the customer experience because if you want to, you can immediately when someone opens that and as a seller you get this information, you can maybe send a note, send a message in this very moment. So smart labels, one thing we're looking into in the IoT area. Second, data driven. A great example of how data within supply chains, but also from the external world can be used for the benefit of better supply chains. This is a company called Everstream Analytics. It started in my innovation center a couple of years ago. We spun that off last year, or I think two years ago, because we wanted to bring in this, another data component and data expertise. It's called now Everstream Analytics. What it basically is, in simple words, it is Google Maps showing you all locations that are relevant for your supply chain, and you can map these locations in there. It shows you all the flows of goods between these locations, but that's all internal data. What it also does, it includes external data, and it shows you in a near real-time scenario any event that is happening around the world. And events can be, of course, a hurricane in Florida, but it's not so spectacular. You see this happening on TV, but it could be a shooting in New York. It could be a strike in Belgium. It could be a port congestion somewhere else. Traffic jams, of course, as well. So one platform that gives you a huge amount of transparency. We drove that further. The platform is also leveraging external data to assess supplier health, to predict financial instability of suppliers, and so on and so forth. My favorite use case where we sold that product is actually the SOS Children Villages, and they are tracking all their locations, for safety reasons. Same for our corporate security department. So whenever I'm traveling, they're taken care. That's also good to know. Automated. I think you've seen many robots in warehouses if you're a bit interested in logistics. So they're becoming much smarter, and in particular more. So a simple robot that is moving a pallet from A to B is really boring for someone in logistics and supply chain management that's being applied at scale. This is a sorting robot by a company called DoraBot, and what you see is the end of a sortation process, and these shipments then are being placed in these yellow boxes, and the yellow boxes then are being put into the delivery vans. You see the numbers. This robot is 40% more efficient than a human being, and that leads to 1,000 parcels per hour. The accuracy is at 99%, so it's really huge. And we use AI to keep that accuracy high. We're not doing this, by the way, to replace people. We're doing this to shift manpower to other more value-adding parts. We have a labor shortage anyways, and you can imagine that this process being done by a human being is quite boring, stressful, and not challenging. And that's why we're doing that. It becomes even more important on the very other end of this sortation line, so what we call the in-feed. So anything that comes in and then needs to go on a conveyor belt, because this process is much more complex, because the shipments that come in, they differ so much in size and weight and also handling requirements. We're also currently testing exactly this robot on the other side, where also AI is even more important to recognize what is needed and what needs to be done. And then last not least, there's the sound. I didn't want to have the sound anyways. Last not least, sustainability. I already mentioned really important topic for us and for logistics in general. We want to become net zero in terms of CO2 emissions by 2050, but it is also that we have to become net zero because our customers are demanding this. And also our investors are demanding this. Our customers are demanding this because our CO2 footprint adds to their CO2 footprint. So it's really important, it is a question of staying for us, of staying in business or moving out of business. And one big lever, it is the biggest lever in terms of CO2 reduction, is actually aviation. 70% of our CO2 emissions as a group come from airplanes, from aviation fuels. And that's why, and you see this on the video, that's why we are investing in this example in electric airplanes. This is an airplane called Alice. And Alice just this week actually did its very first flight. So it's a one pilot airplane. We ordered 12 and we will use them as what we call feeder flights. So shorter distances, the airplane can go 800-900 kilometers only, shorter distances that then feed our major regional hubs in the express business. This is just one example. The other big lever in aviation is sustainable aviation fuels. We're also heavily investing as a company. In total, we are investing and will be investing 7 billion euros by 2030 into sustainability, and sustainable aviation fuels is a big one for us. It comes with an additional cost, and that's why we have to be early investing, and then of course convincing our customers that they pay for it. Last not least, I also want to take the people perspective. We were also looking with a trend report and an extensive research into the future of work in logistics. You heard me saying labor shortage is a big topic for us. It's with truck drivers, it's in warehouses and in other areas. And when you discuss today these technology topics on your agenda, please also keep that in mind, right? Any new technology, any new process even, is a change management process. And we're also looking at different generations and how they deal with it. And I brought these numbers because I really find them important when it comes to future leadership that is needed. So you see 9 in 10 people we surveyed, I think we surveyed 7,000 or 8,000 people, believe that technology has been helpful for their role in the past 5 years. So very positive attitude towards technology. But you see around 50% believe that looking into the future, new technology advancements are a threat to their job and to their career. And this is something, we as leaders, we as innovators have to keep in mind. So it's going to be an interesting and challenging journey to transform that business into the future and into a much more digital supply chain operation. So something I also wanted to share with you, because I see this tendency everywhere that we talk technology but not so much talk about people and leadership, and that's why we made this future of work in logistics trend report. So in closing, one of my favorite quotes I found at one point, and it says, I want to read it: if you want growth, innovate. If you want exponential growth, connect. I'm happy that we could do this today, unfortunately only in a virtual environment. I know you're connecting big time today with your interactive agenda. So also keep that in mind. Connectedness is not only an API between two systems, it's really between people and players. And with this, I'd close it. Again, I want to thank Ramesh and the team for having me. And not sure if we do have time. I could take some more time for questions, but I make this your call, Ramesh. Thank you very much all for having me.
Awesome. Well, great, Klaus. That was really, really amazing. I think we have time for one question. If anyone has a burning question that they'd like to ask Klaus. Oh, we have one. And then I'll jump into introducing the dean for you guys.
Hi, Klaus. Thank you for speaking today. Really appreciate it. You mentioned 5 attributes, being connected, data-driven, automated, sustainability, and customer-centric, with some examples that DHL is currently doing. Out of these 5, what is the most difficult one that you foresee in the future? And what are you and your team doing now to overcome this roadblock?
Oh, thanks for that question. Is actually a good one. If I had to pick one, I'd say data-driven. So data-driven, it's not so much about what to do with that data. There is big data analytics and there is artificial intelligence and all of that, and algorithms and all of that. It is more to have the right data and the right data quality as a starting point to then do the magic and come to the right conclusions. And this is very challenging at this point in time for several reasons. These data sets are not just in one place, even for one company, they're not in one place. So we as a company have one center of excellence that we call data lake, and they're doing nothing but bringing together data. They're not even manipulating it; they just bring it together. And I can also give you an example of a customer case we had where we wanted to optimize transportation flows and inventory levels for an airline. But before the team, our data analytics team in the innovation center in Singapore, before they started, doing their thing, they had to program a bot, more or less, that collected all that data from that company's intranet. Yeah, so it wasn't a database or so. It was just somewhere, in as a text or whatever, as a table in the intranet. So data driven is a big topic, more because of the availability of the right data. And to your question on what we're doing about it, I mean exactly this. Learning from these. As a company, I mentioned the data lake initiative towards the customer. Running these projects with a dedicated customer data analytics team and learning from that. Of course, we cannot do so much in terms of how our customers organize their data. This will improve for sure, with cloud and central storage and blockchains as well. This will improve, but we as a business as such, as an industry, are not there yet. So that's challenging. I like that question. It's a good one.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Klaus, from the University of Texas at Dallas. Thank you for joining us. So excited to hear about what DHL is doing, what you're doing. And thank you again. We wish you a great rest of your day.
Thank you all. Enjoy the event. Thank you.
All right. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you guys Dean Percool. He's the dean for JSOM. And so he's here just to give us a welcome and his support for our wonderful event here today.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, so, this was a wonderful talk. I'm glad I came a little early and had the chance to listen to it. Now I am afraid you have to put up with the dean. So that must be the price you all have to pay. So I just wanted to come and welcome our guests from outside. And I also wanted to thank our students and our colleagues that have put together this program. What a wonderful program! I mean, this is really impressive, and this to me distinguishes UTD from many other schools. You look at this event, this is truly a partnership of our students, Association for Supply Chain Management and their chapter here, and industry. And people have come together, and our faculty and staff, of course. So it is a wonderful event. You know, in academia, we have a big challenge. Our challenge is this. Technology is now moving very rapidly. Education systems and culture, and the culture is the biggest part, is not designed for this. Think about in 1960, how much innovation was there, and how fast it came. Today, every year the technology changes, and the technology has basically penetrated everything, our lives, the businesses, the way we live, the way we entertain ourselves. So it is incredibly important that we keep up with this technology because it changes businesses. And this is a business school. Well, who has to keep up with this? The people who write the books. Well, you know, we still have books. And every 3 or 4 years, they get together and, you know, they come up with a new edition. Too slow. Our faculty are challenged. Why are our faculty challenged? Well, they have to do research and teaching. They have double mission. Well, if you do research, I will encourage you to take a look at some of our research journals and the articles that some of our faculty write in it. Now, I'm a big supporter of research, but understand that a lot of that is theoretical work. And it does bring a vision and forward thinking, but it does not bring what is going on immediately now in businesses, which is absolutely necessary for our students. So they are challenged. We challenge them to publish in the very best journals, and this is an incredibly difficult thing because you have a handful of journals and thousands of people from all around the world, from very best universities, shooting for these journals. And our faculty does an incredibly good job in that. And then we turn around and we tell them, well, by the way, you gotta keep up with technology. And, you know, some of these guys don't leave their offices, so how are they going to keep up with technology? That's why we try to actually create a portfolio of faculty. We bring faculty from industry, and then we push them to keep up with industry, because the moment you walk out, then you start falling behind. So what do we need? We need, I hate this word because, anyway, forget the because. It takes a village. So it does take a village to educate the students today, regardless of their age and level. Because if our friends and colleagues from industry don't come back and participate in these programs of this type, or in our career center, or in various classes, okay, our education would be incomplete. So I am grateful. I want to really thank the people that are taking time and participating as speakers in today's program. And I want to congratulate our students. You guys are way ahead of the curve. So I am so happy to see this. And that's all I got to say. I wish you a great event.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dean Percool, for being here and for inspiring us with your words of the impact that we can make as students, faculty, or just industry professionals in supply chain. So next, I would like to invite our panelists. We have Sandhya from O9 Solutions here today. Hello. Awesome. And then- Awesome. So Sandhya has been working with O9 Solutions for the past 3 years. She's been providing industry-specific solutions to its customers. She's an experienced supply chain professional with demonstrated history of working in retail, CPG, and the fashion industry. She's skilled in supply planning, inventory management, supply chain optimization, process engineering, demand planning, and business process improvement. So welcome, Sandhya. You can go ahead and grab a seat here for our panel table. And next, I'll invite Gautam. He is the Director of Global Business from Blue Yonder. Round of applause for Gautam. So Gautam is a technology executive with proven success in quickly understanding customer business intricacies, delivering enterprise technology solutions with high ROI that bolster top and bottom line growth. He's accomplished in the cloud and digital transformation advisory, large-scale programs and engagement, management, and he has developed and deployed solutions across Fortune 50 companies, startups, and management consulting companies. So welcome, we're happy you're here. And last but not least, we'll have Ashutosh. He's the founder and CEO of Koi Reader Technologies. So welcome, Ashutosh. He's an industry executive. Thank you. He's an industry executive, management consulting, and technology leader, an innovator, and an entrepreneur with deep expertise in logistics, supply chain, maritime, and trade. His experience includes senior leadership positions at $17 billion corporations like XPO Logistics, Big Four firms such as PricewaterhouseCoopers, Ernst & Young, and supply chain technology companies like Blue Yonder and Oracle. He's founder and CEO at his current innovation startup that's won global recognition and been designated Cool Vendor in supply chain execution by Gartner. So welcome, Ashutosh. And finally, I'm going to introduce Professor Siram, who is from the director of the Center of Machine Learning with the Erickson Johnson School of Engineering and Computer Science, who will moderate today's talk. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Oh, thanks. So we have a bunch of questions that Ramesh has obtained from the students. The way I'm thinking of conducting this panel is that I'll ask a question. First 3 questions are for all 3 of you. If you could kindly take 2 to 3 minutes to answer the question, and then there are specific questions for each of you. And this is the format that even the students have proposed. Some common questions for all of you, and then each specific question based on your experience and expertise. The other thing is that I want to give maybe 5 minutes for students here to ask questions, 5 to 10 minutes. So we'll try to give that time as well, so it can be as interactive as possible. So hello and welcome for this panel. The first question is actually something that I have been also thinking about quite a bit. As somebody who's been doing machine learning for about 20 years, 22 years now, machine learning and AI, I'm seeing the growth of this in many fields. Healthcare is one that immediately comes to mind. And the Association for Supply Chain Management ranked AI and robotics as 4 and 5 trends in the 2022 Supply Chain Conference last week. So what is driving that change in the industry? So we'll start with Ashutosh and then.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. Yeah. So I'm a 99 graduate, and I can totally correlate with what you just said. My final year project was, we were still in the days of floppy disks, and I was trying to integrate neural network with fuzzy logic to control a stepper motor. And I know that didn't work. So from there till date, the concept of neural network training has been there, but what has truly advanced, it's all matrix multiplication. And what has truly advanced are the algorithms and the arrival of GPUs, which allows you to do, that kind of computation in a very rapid manner. and NVIDIA has definitely done a phenomenal job, and they continue to push the envelope of things. The other aspect is applied AI. There are a number of technologies that were being developed, and finally they have come to a head, where like things like unstructured data, they could not be processed, and AI has started to play a role in it. And when you start adding these individual things together as a sum, they become very powerful. And that's why because of the arrival of these multiple things coming together, different industry verticals, different business units, they are applying it. This is, in my perspective, year one of the AI in industry.
So I kind of look at AI and ML as two separate things. ML is really the driving force at the end of the day. But in supply chain specifically, ML and robotics are, at the end of the day, they're used to drive costs down, right? And also solve problems at scale. I think the scale is something that was missing. But now you have the opportunity to leverage. I mean, the technology has changed dramatically, right? If you think about the last 10 years, you've gone from data centers to cloud computing to really having capacity that you can just keep expanding, right? So that has allowed a lot of these supply chains to grow, right? So the cost reduction is really what is driving, the use of ML and robotics at the end of the day. But what people want to do is to have a low-touch autonomous system in your supply chain. So they really want everything to be automated, right? They want these machine learning algorithms to run every day. They want them to be. They want to use that for forecasting, fulfillment, whatnot, and they don't want to touch it. It needs to happen seamlessly, right? And that extends all the way to your transportation networks. Now, what happens is one of the dangers of doing that is you become a single point of failure, right? So you need to make sure that you have backup systems. You need a plan B, right? What happens if something fails? How do you recover from that? I think a lot of companies are now thinking about those things, and vendors like us, we find ourselves actually managing supply chains more and more, right? I mean, whether we like it or not, we are now managing supply chains. We have all these fancy algorithms, but at the end of the day, we have to manage the supply chain to give the customer what they want. So I think that's really, I would like to summarize it that way.
Can you all hear me? Yeah. So to me, in the recent years, what has required this is supply chains have become substantially complex, right? And a couple of events in the recent, like number one, product portfolio mixes have become very, very complex, which means you have longer lead times. At the same time, there is a lot of interplay between the different systems. Second, markets want it to be very, very agile. With COVID, that's increased the need for a very agile, fast network. And lastly, sustainability, right? With sustainability, everybody wants networks that are friendly to the environment. What that does, it brings back the concept of nearshoring. At the same time, you want cost to be at the utmost important. So as you're trying to solve all this, the one potential candidate that promises it is AI, because what AI does is it helps create smarter, faster, leaner supply chains. And from a business point of view, what does that mean? That means I'm able to have an end-to-end supply chain wherein I can solve my problems all the way from sales to procurement. And with AI, I have the capability to take large amount of data, create correlations, give view to your operations, and all of this can be done very, very quickly. So, which is why AI has become this promising factor to help solve this, the problems that we see near term.
Couldn't agree more, especially as somebody who's doing both AI and machine learning. I couldn't there's absolutely no way I can even disagree with the statement of ML is different from AI, because AI is much broader in the sense that it also talks about knowledge representation. How do you capture human knowledge into it? The decades of knowledge, how can you encode in a model? It also includes reasoning, which is right after you make a prediction, how do you reason it? How do you explain it? All these things fall under the purview of AI. So thank you for these answers, and I completely agree with this. I always said it's not that the systems were suddenly smarter, it's that the machines are significantly faster. So your observation about GPUs, I completely agree, and the same thing with building leaner models. That's what we are seeing even on healthcare. The models that we build actually take a little less number of decisions than a clinician makes, kind of rendering some of those decisions more meaningful. So I completely agree with this. Thank you so much. Second question, I'll start with you, Gautam. The supply chain risk management has become a key topic in the last 2 years during the pandemic. And this year is all about converting data to information according to ASCM research. What analytic or planning tools do we have today to drive improvements for a resilient supply chain?
So this is actually a pretty loaded question, right? And most people now talk about supply chain because of the pandemic. So while you have tools like forecasting algorithms that can take into account events such as the pandemic and adjust your forecast, there are lots of physical constraints to implement that, right? For example, you might not have somebody to source product from, right? You don't have alternate suppliers. So those are challenges that exist, right? So if you really think about some of the tools, you have your traditional forecasting tools that could, at least from a demand perspective, predict what will happen. But more importantly, you need monitoring tools across the entire supply chain, right? So think about what we call a control tower, right? So that's actually looking at your entire supply chain from the time your product leaves your supplier to the time it is actually being received at some point, whether it's a warehouse or you're shipping directly to the customer. But what happens when something gets disrupted along the way? How do you react? And so the tools that are going to be more useful in the future are going to be tools that will, these control tower type of tools, which not only monitor what is going on, but also predict what will happen and provide recommendations. That's where your AI comes into the picture, right? To provide recommendations and say, here is what you need to do. Now, all this is great in theory, but if you want to implement it, there's a lot of, how do you source? So it goes back to your sourcing decisions. It goes back to, we've pretty much outsourced our supply to the Far East, right? Everything comes from China or wherever else. So there are constraints of lead times. You just cannot go and say, okay, I need product from somewhere else, but where is that? Right? So I think there's a lot of policy that goes into it. So people, like Klaus rightly said, right? It was a wake-up call, the pandemic. What do? You can't go and in-source very quickly, right? So these tools will help partly to solve the issue, to minimize the risk. But I don't think it is the only thing, right? There's also a lot of policy that goes into figuring out what you need to do as a company to manage your supply chain.
I think all vertical leaders today do understand that resilient supply chain is the way to go, because that's what helps you identify a very dynamic network and how do you solve it. Now, if you look the space, it's strewn with enterprise planning, be it cloud providers, different providers who provide solution all the way from, be it smart analytics in the space of demand planning or supply, transportation, warehouse, you name it, in all space they have those capabilities. And like Gautam mentioned, one of the major things is how can you plan far out into the future, but near term, as changes are happening, your trends are changing, how can you quickly react? That's what one of the major features is. But it again goes back to the age-old problem, data becomes the bottleneck everywhere. I think today, unlike 10 or 20 years ago, data is not a bottleneck, but clean, harmonized data becomes a bottleneck. as a vendor, when we go to every customer, they do have data, but is it in a structured, harmonized manner that we can consume and provide analytics? And once its software is, O9, that I have been deploying for 3 years, common problems that we see we are solving is in the space of demand planning using analytics, be it supply planning. One space for years we've always been talking about how demand planning can use analytics so that you can better predict the future. What we're also seeing, a lot more customers today are looking into the back end, into supply. If I normally it takes X number of days along with my different delays to reach from point A to B. How can I use some of my historical data and patterns so I can use smart analytics there to maybe negotiate my contracts with my vendors, with my third-party providers, all of those factors. So those are the small differentiating factors which I think make some of these providers stand apart.
So it's a very good question to ask, and fortunately, we are at a stage in the industry where a lot more people know the word supply chain than they did, like 5-7 years ago. Like it's on cover page of Wall Street. COVID made everyone more aware of it. But truly, supply chain risk and resiliency is not a new topic. It's always been there for people who have been in the industry. And they're when we are talking about risk, it's not just COVID and what happened after that. Like I remember when Katrina hit, in transportation management systems, we had to think ahead that okay, New Orleans is going to be closed, so we need to block that lane, a few weeks out, so you're not tendering loads into that area. And then what's the impact of cost? New tools have definitely arrived, but I think when we talk about risk and resiliency in supply chain, we got to segment. A segmentation in terms of, what is the definition of risk? Risk is anything that from an organization's, corporation's perspective that, reduces value for them, whether it's, tangible in terms of dollars or intangibles. Number two, in terms of, planning, there are two sorts of planning. One is proactive, second is reactive. Proactive planning is like, what are my bottlenecks where risk can originate? A definition of risk, you go to a $65 billion, $70 billion company, and if they can't, very simple thing, if they can't scan their labels with, 100% accuracy, if they're operating at 85 to 95%, that 10% is risk because you don't know where your products are. And for a $60+ billion corporation, that can run into hundreds of millions of dollars. And this risk originates from conveyor belts to the dock doors and everything in between, your inventory management, working capital. So this is a huge risk. Is this bigger than what we saw in the last 3 years? I think so. So when talking about risk and resiliency, we got to number one, talk about efficiency and accuracy in supply chains. And that's a big area we focus on. We go into corporations and say, how do we move the needle from 85 to 99? In fact, if you just put a hashtag, let's talk accuracy, that's something I started promoting on LinkedIn. And then you come to the reactive part of it. Something we know has happened. How do we react to that, right? So that's where a lot of discussion is going towards building autonomous supply chains. It's, again, like I said, I think we are in year 101 of AI application. There are AMRs, AGVs, all those things that you see are out there. But my fundamental question when I saw these tools, robots come out, they can't even, they're pretty dumb right now. Like you take an AMR from any company, all it does today is it picks a pallet from one location and drops it into another. If somebody placed an incorrect pallet, it doesn't know. So there's no intelligence built. So the definition of risk comes from many different perspectives. I would segment it from a corporation perspective and then look at it like what's important to the organization, what's the biggest value driver, and then act on it, build plans around it.
Actually goes back to the dean's point. As researchers, we don't really think about some of these problems when we are developing the solutions. For us, it's about, oh, let's get this technically correct. Well, let's improve the performance on benchmark problems, but don't think about quite how it scales to the real situations like you guys are talking about. So it's pretty insightful. Thanks. So we'll start with you, Sandhya, this one. How can students today be prepared for a potential supply chain job opportunities in AI and automation?
I think basically it's not different than any other jobs, in my opinion. I think definitely with the advancements we've made in AI, be it a business analyst job or AI data scientist or be it an AI engineer, what skills you require are different. To an extent, some of the skills that you required in the past now gets minimized because there's a lot of automation that is done. But there's still that human part that will come to it. And that's what I think the students even today require to bring to the table. And they are none different than the first principles, right? Get your basics right. There is a lot of avenues within the universities outside. There are a lot of data labs, Google, Amazon, AI.com. Everybody provides different kinds of forums where you can get exposure. So in my perspective, get that exposure, get those skills, the fundamentals, analytical skills, start developing a keen business acumen, strategic thinking. Those are the base fundamentals. Now, I know there's a lot that I always keep getting asked is, do we need to do certifications, stuff like that? To me, they augment you. They're not never going to be the elixir to keep you apart from anything. Absolutely, all of that helps. And that's a part of continued learning. Even the current workforce, when I started the workforce, there wasn't AI ever. So that's a part of upskilling that everybody in today's day and age, be in the workforce or before they are in the workforce, need to keep doing. So even this is none different. The basic first principles apply. And, I would say enjoy the journey. And as you go along the journey, you're always going to have those opportunities to pick it up.
Sure. I run a startup, so the people that we hire are everything. I can't emphasize more. Without a strong team, we can't do anything. So, so what we have learned during the hiring process, and all the people, if we are doing like really cutting edge work in AI, so you really, I think first thing we got to do is differentiate. What is it that we want to do? Do we want to go into AI research? So then you got to target companies like Google, Facebook, or universities where their research is taking place. But know that research by the application of it, like the dean rightfully said, is disjointed. So by the time a research is completed and it gets applied, the fun is gone. Something else has come in. The second part is applied AI. And for applied AI, do you really need to hire a PhD who has spent like the last 3 years? Because that person may have completed his PhD 3 years ago, and the latest algorithm may have, neural network may have come out 2 months ago. So when we look at hire people, what we focus on is not certifications, not which institute you have come from, what projects have you executed. We actually put you through the ringer and ask you to solve problems during interview. And the other thing is a big portion of the talent was developed using if-else programming. AI is not if-else. It's probabilistic, it's data science. So you got to merge the two and have, if you have data science in your portfolio and you have done projects, open source projects, or engage with startups, there are startups all over, they're constantly, working with interns. Work with them. I would say don't go for the large corporations for your internships. Work with startups. That's where, the good stuff is happening. and that when you take to the large corporation after you graduate, they will even value more, what you have done. That's my perspective.
So supply chains are about really understanding complexity and using technology to solve problems at scale. Right? At the end of the day, that's what we do. So I think you have really two tracks for anybody in the room if you want to pursue this. A technical track where you're looking at all the, like Sandhya said, right? Your data analysis skills, your data science skills, and then you have your non-technical track, right? Where you can become a practitioner, a supply chain practitioner. You could be in consulting, right? You join the big fours or whoever it is. You become an industry specialist, like she's, your retail, right? Yeah, so you can become an industry specialist, or you become a functional specialist, right? Somebody that says, hey, I'm a forecasting specialist, or I'm a fulfillment specialist. I mean, I've known people who've done warehouse management for all their career, right? So there's a lot of tracks, but I think if you really want to learn about supply chain, when you go shopping tomorrow, I mean, just try to figure out how the product got to the shelf, whether you're buying a pair of shoes or you go to the grocery store and buy a loaf of bread. Just try to understand that it took a lot of planning, a lot of execution to bring that product to the shelf, right? So that's where I would start really trying to figure out what supply chains are all about.
Actually, I love the diversity in the answers. It kind of gives a nice perspective. A follow-up question. I was going to jump directly to individual questions for each of you, but a follow-up question is quite relevant here because it was among many of the students' questions. So for students who potentially want to work in these areas, is there a specific platform, language, software, do you think that is useful? I mean, I'm getting the general feeling that those things don't matter as much as the projects, but we need to hear it from the experts. Should they master anything in specific, or should they have a broad overview of the area? What is your experience on this? We'll start with you, Ash.
So I think the bulk of the work in AI and data science is happening in Python. So if you're working in C++, etc., it's great, but those things to build something and deploy, you won't have access to open source libraries. And we are in an era where, like I said earlier on, you have to really distinguish what you want to do. Most of the corporations are working with applied AI. And in applied AI, most of the work is happening in Python. So definitely that's a skill you should have. But again, if you are engaging as a supply chain professional, so you don't really need to know the programming, but if you understand, so you can become an effective supply chain leader, product manager, whatever is your career progression. So you can ask the right questions to hire the right talent or build the right team, make sure that your projects are successful. There are so many other tools out there, and the industry is changing so fast. But like, I don't know Python programming. I'm not even a supply chain guy. I did my electrical engineering in '99, and I sold my books in third year of my program. So people called me crazy back then. But here I am, working on AI and supply chain at the intersection. So the point is, stay hungry, stay curious, keep learning, because it is an evolving field and it will keep evolving. Today, Python is the tool. Tomorrow, it may change.
I mean, I know Python programming, by the way, but I don't code. So it's a tough thing, right? I think, but I would go back to what Sandhya said. You need to have the basics right. And I mean, once you do something in one technology, to take that skill and transfer it to any other technology is not a big deal, at least in my opinion, right? Now, having said that, on the technical side, things change every day. Right? I mean, we were talking about cloud a few years ago. There were very few cloud providers. It was always AWS. Then came Azure, then came GCP, and then now it's Oracle, then IBM Cloud, Salesforce. I mean, now people are talking about multi-cloud. But again, you have to go back to the fundamentals. I mean, what does the cloud give you? Why do you need cloud to begin with? I think those are things that you have to be able to answer to start with, right? So get the fundamentals right, and then you can go and pick up skills in any of these, right? But again, do you want to be a technologist to say I'm an Azure specialist, or do you want to say I'm a supply chain guy that leverages cloud to help my customers do something? So it all depends, right? I mean, so there's so many tracks that you just have to pick what you're passionate about and follow that.
Thank you.
So I think depending on what you want to do, the basic, I go back to the basic three fundamentals: strategic thinking, analytical thinking, and business acumen. Depending on what space you want to develop your skills in one of it. So I was a supply chain practitioner all my career, running demand planning, supply planning organizations. About 3 years ago is when I made the switch to be a provider. So a lot of this technology, by means of training and education, I've done it. But about 15 years, it's all about running businesses. And Excel's my best friend, because anything my planners or my managers would go, I could churn it out and get it done. So as I came into 2009, that's when we were starting R. And I'm like, R was our medium at that point to solve all the problems. And I'm like, I think I need to get a hold of R. I at least need to know the basics. So as I start dabbling, that's when the advent of Python came, and nobody even wants R anymore, right? So that just, get your fundamentals, and then the skills are transferable in that it's the thinking, it's the thought process.
Thank you. Let's stay on demand planning. So I'll ask you the first question. So how can emerging technology address long-standing supply chain challenges like demand planning?
Yeah, so for demand planning has been a problem that's been there for years together, and it's just how we solve has been different. Years ago, there wasn't data, now we have data. How do we harmonize it? There were techniques, they were not as advanced as now. They are more advanced now. So how do these get solved? And I think it's some of the technology that's available that currently that helps solve it. Number one is, again, going to the original point, I'll kind of connect that here, is data science. In the past, data science in companies were like an incubator model. They would do some kind of data science on their own, but they would never be scalable. So many times they would be this mystical black box. And with all of these technology that we have, now all that knowledge from a data science has been from the data scientist, be it an incubator model in a university or in an organization, can very quickly be powered by this AI/ML based tools. And it could either be, you could just plug and play their codes, or you can create your own. And that helps solve a lot of the demand planning problems. Second is, wanting very swifter and agile supply chains require being able to predict the demand, and second, there are disruptions that come, and these tools and technologies helps you predict those disruptions. And last but not the least is data. Now, when we tell data from a demand planning perspective, what technology is enabled is to be able to merge data. One, external data and internal data. In the past, everybody would use your internal data. I know how this is doing in store A and store B, all of that. Now we have a ton of external data which is available in the market source. Structured, unstructured. You can tell, hey, when is a football game going to be here? When is the weather going to be XYZ? When do I expect snow is going to fall? I can take all of that external data source, combine it with my internal data, and give a much, much better data. And the second, to the same point of data, is in the past we used to always look at historical data. Now you have historical data, that is drivers, how's my shipment, how's my POS, all of that, along with my future drivers. So that together is what's giving this power, this amp to the demand planning tools today.
Gautam, given all your experience, what advice would you have for someone who starts out in the market, either in a job or even as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that I think about myself when I answer the question, right? I mean, I had all kinds of experience. I worked in startups. I went to the Big Four. I spent some time there. I was at Pepsi. Really working in the industry. So over the years, you kind of figure out some things that that are important, right? So I think the first thing is networking. Right? People, you all need to network a lot when you get into a job, or whether you're an entrepreneur or whatever it is. That's important. I don't have to tell this to this generation, because these guys like grow up on social media, right? I mean, they're always networking. The second thing is, always find mentors whenever you're in a job, or you're starting a company. You need mentors that actually take you along, right? So that is extremely important. That's something that you seek. If your employment doesn't really offer you mentorship, go and seek it somewhere, but make sure you're doing that actively, right? The third thing is get diverse experiences. I think that always helps. Sometimes when I try to connect the dots with all the different places I worked, I was actually surprised Blue Yonder hired me back, because I was out of the supply chain space for almost 15 years, right? And then they said, well, you got the basics, so you can come back, right? And then I realized that, yeah, I've done a lot of things, that I was able to connect the dot with all my experience in the data area, and so it was a very seamless transition. So that helps, right? So get diverse experiences. That always is a good thing. I mean, there's, I think there's also this, somebody also said, you keep learning continuously, because this field changes a lot. So you have to be relevant. I mean, don't think that just because you've done Python coding, you're done with that, right? But you have to just be relevant. So just keep learning. I mean, I do a lot of courses myself on platforms, I mean, different platforms, right? We have courses internally. I also go out and seek other courses outside, just to keep myself relevant. I'll be at least be able to talk about it. Like cloud is one example, right? I mean, I didn't know anything about the cloud, but you kind of learn along the way, right? So those are the things I would really encourage students to do, and also learn to manage up, because it's also very important. You got to get managers that you don't like over time, but you need to learn that skill. So these are all soft skills that are very important. And last but not least, I think communication is something that is extremely critical when you go into the job market, right? To be able to convey an idea very clearly and with precision, right, and with specificity, that'll take you a long way. So if you struggle with communication skills, go get some help. Try to learn that, and make sure that you're a very good communicator. That takes you a long way.
Thank you. Ashutosh, given you coded neural networks in '99, this question is quite relevant, I hope. What strategies supply chain leaders can use to embark on successful AI-powered automation in type initiatives? And maybe it's a two-part question. The second is the other side. What are the emerging opportunities for graduate students in this space?
Sure. So, since we launched our company, one thing we did was we went around the world, from Singapore to Germany to Brazil, India, United States, everywhere. And we participated with corporate innovation programs and innovation challenges. And wherever we went, we would eventually win. That we have a very successful track record globally. But it became very clear to us, which are the programs that are successful and which were not. So the key difference as a supply chain leader, if you're going into an organization, or if you want to position yourself, the first and most important thing is, the business leader need to be part of the innovation team. Today, digital innovation and supply chain leader, they are two different tracks in a lot of companies. So the innovation leaders, they go out and scout for technology companies to bring them in, but the business leaders, they come in later on, so there's no project funding. So if you want to run a successful innovation program, the first thing to have is the right stakeholders, business funding. Once you have these two things, the third most important thing is let's say you're working with a company which has 200 warehouses, and you can go and test or a lot of new technologies. But tell me one warehouse where the ops team will let you, run an autonomous robot amok. They won't. So you got to have a designated center for innovation. And once you do that, then you can rapidly test not just one, multiple things in parallel. And then the last piece of the equation is, Scout. There are lots of companies. I've seen this, consistently over my career. Any new stuff comes out, there are services companies. In any company who doesn't even know the technology or don't have the people, they'll start running email campaigns, claiming they are the world leaders in that space. So how, as a leader, you as supply chain leader, you distinguish which companies to work with. So look for specialization, I would say. Look for companies that know the domain, because then they will be solving the right problem. Otherwise, you'll be reaching out to technology companies who will be reaching out to you as a supply chain leader. Like, tell me, what problem should I solve? And if you have these 4 things in play, you'll have a successful program. Otherwise, a lot of wasted time, effort, exciting LinkedIn post, but it won't translate into business value. In terms of AI opportunity, there are a couple of ideas I'll throw out that whoever has an entrepreneurial mindset, they can go after it. Like, one big opportunity is, and big corporations have not even realized this yet. One big opportunity is, bulk of the work was happening, like we moved from client server to cloud, and then we had executables that were being deployed on client side. But as the bulk of the work in AI is happening in Python, and Python cannot be encrypted. So how do you deploy that in a client side? How do I protect my IP, right? So there's a lot of work happening in what's called confidential computing. Intel just published a research paper in April, and we are already deploying it in some places. But then comes the InfoSec part. The InfoSec team wants to scan my code. They want to know that, hey, you're not deploying a virus. I'm not deploying a virus. They know that, we know it. The InfoSec team will say, hey, we have NDAs, and I could, from my perspective as a product company owner, like, I could care less about your NDA because you'll see my code. I've spent 7 years to build this. Why should I expose my code? So how do you solve this problem today, right? So there's one framework that has come out in the industry, but it's just one. I think there's an opportunity for startups to get into this place and come up with innovative models. The second one is data annotation with, there's a lot of companies that are coming out there. Data in AI is the key. So how, creating platforms, there are companies that are coming out and saying that, hey, put your data in the cloud. And I'm in day-to-day conversation with the customers, and they're saying, I don't want you to transfer any data anywhere, right? So how do I expedite my data annotation process for deploying automation solutions? I can deploy in cloud platforms. So there are a bunch of open source platforms that are out there. If you are an entrepreneur at heart, take one of the open source codes, come up with, fork it, create an innovative model. There's a huge market out there, untapped, and there are few people doing here and there. So there are several more ideas, but these are 2 that are prominent on my mind.
Do we have time for some student questions? Yeah. So we are now in the open question session.
Hello. So this is a question to Gautam. So my name is Vivek, and I am a professional MBA student. So you guys can hear me, right? Okay. So I'm a professional MBA student here at UT Dallas, and also I work at a vendor company of telecommunications who does 5G RAN, 5G radios, and some of the network solutions. So now with the supply chain, with what Blue Yonder does, have you already seen what is the intersection happening between 5G and the supply chain and IoT? I just wanted to get some thoughts.
So I don't know if you're aware, but we are owned by Panasonic. Blue Yonder got bought over by Panasonic about, I think this was last year. So we have a lot of edge computing that we bring into the supply chain, right? Because Panasonic manufactures a lot of devices, right? Sensors, etc. So if you want to think about robotics really being part of the supply chain, then that's your edge computing use case, right? So 5G, I really don't know exactly how we are using it, but there are lots of use cases where we have devices on the edge that need to connect back to the supply chain. So I'm quite sure there are 5G somehow plays into that, but I'm not totally familiar with that side of our business yet, because we are still exploring use cases. Um, uh, One of the things that I enabled with one of my customers was a use case where you have a truck that's barcoded, right? So when the trucks pull into a warehouse, a lot of times you don't know that the truck has actually come in. So we have deployed cameras that will actually go and scan the trucks as they come in, and that information is fed back to the planning engine, right? So you can actually plan when to unload the truck, right? So your efficiencies in your warehouse go up. But that's one use case we enabled, but I don't know specifically about 5G.
I can add a quick comment to that. I have a ton of experience. And so basically you got three key providers in the industry: AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile. You see all those beautiful TV ads, 5G network, right? The reality of 5G is it doesn't work for uploads. And they cap the data. So 100 Mbps is the max you can upload into the cloud on a 5G network. Download, yeah, but when you're deploying applications, you're watching things and then you're sending information into the cloud. So 5G, there's a lot of hype. Really what's happening is it's 4G that is being adopted in the industry. 5G, I think, will have a role to play, but the device miniaturization is going to take place in IoT. So you have IoT, and then the next step of this is what I call NIoT, Nano Internet of Things. That's coming.
Any other questions from the audience?
Hi, yeah, this is a question for, I guess, like the whole panel or all three of you. So I work in the business side of the supply chain, and I see that people in business will understand the business processes, and people on the technical side will understand the technical work required. But I feel a disconnect in the knowledge between the business application and the technical application. So do you see a disconnect within your organization between the business side and the technical side? And as a leader, how are you addressing that gap in knowledge to create a more cohesive company?
That's a great question, by the way. So it's kind of a weird dynamic that has happened in the industry, right? Like providers like us, when I started out, this is 1998, I think that was when I started in I2. We were asked to go and solve a problem, right? Like I didn't think of myself as a technical guy or a functional guy or just a project manager or whatever it is. I was told, go and solve the customer's problem. And so we went and solved the customer's problem, right? So I think over time what happened is this, and in those days, we used to go and work on the customer's production box directly, right? So now you have layers in between the business and IT. And a lot of times, and this is a travesty that we have created, okay? So I completely understand where you're coming from. Because for me, if I really want to understand what the customer's pain point, I go and talk to the business. And so I completely understand where they're coming from, right? But 95% of the people just don't get it on the technology side. So it's a challenge. And I really don't know how to solve it right now, right? I mean, this is a big gap. Because see, here's the thing. When you have a guy in technology saying, I'm running an application for the customer, it's a very different mindset than the guy saying, I'm running the customer's operations. Okay, so that is where the gap is, because they don't understand that what they're doing will affect customers' operations, right? So in supply chain, it's all about operations. There's a clock that starts, and the clock doesn't stop. So if we don't understand the clock, we are screwed. I mean, pardon the French, but that's what happens, right? So it's a very difficult problem, and I lament about it every day, believe me, because my technical guys just don't get it, right? So I understand, but there's no easy solution. So
I will take a minute to answer that question. So, sorry about this panel. This is, my doctorate degree is in computer information systems and operations. And I got it from a business school, not an engineering school. But it was a technical degree. So I have lived in this business school world as a nerd for a long time. So what has happened is that the business schools ignored technology, ignored even quantitative analytics, and kind of went for the MBA, soft skills. You know, we get the nerd to come in and give us the model, and then we work with the results, or we get the IT guys implement the system, and we just use it. So the business schools are at fault. Now, on the other hand, engineering and comp science is also at fault because they totally ignored business. Comp science, if you look at what comp science does, okay, 90% of them are actually working on business problems, indirectly, but they are. And they totally ignored business. Even today, I cannot get my colleagues in comp science to offer one course related to business. So anyway, we have an educational problem. Now, I understood this very early on, and I fought very hard today, even today, to create an information systems discipline in business schools where the students are sophisticated technology users. They understand technology, but also understand business. Unfortunately, this discipline that I got my PhD in 1980. Well, I took my first job in 1981. And in the Informs, I created the College on Information Systems. I created a conference that's now flourishing 20 whatever years ago. So I was at the forefront pushing this. The business school deans often didn't understand and didn't care, okay? I'm one of the first deans. I have been a dean 40 years now, but 26 years, not quite 40 years. I have been in the business 40 years. And really, there wasn't anybody else that came from the background I came from, information systems, technology, and operations. All the deans came from econ, some from accounting, some from finance. They ignored us. And so now I look at the world, I smile, and I say, it's the revenge of the nerds, okay? All of these guys are struggling to stand up programs. They don't have faculty to do it. This is why UTD is light years ahead of the rest of the business schools. But there is a problem in the education system. We really have to put comp science and business together and let them learn from each other. So sorry about the.
If I can just share my experience from last week. So we wanted to launch our marketing campaign. Okay, so I wanted to hire content writers, people who can tell effective stories. So my job listing was pretty broad, from MBA operations systems to computer science, whoever can basically what I did is I ran a competition where I gave 1.5 hours and I gave them a topic from supply chain. I said, let's say label scanning, right? Or yard automation. How would you sell this to a C-suite? And you have open internet access, do your research. So the key skill as students, I think, is the ability to do research, right? So that was my round one. In round two, I shortened it to 45 minutes. I gave them another topic, right? So in 45 minutes, person who doesn't know anything about supply chain can research and write something compelling. I know I can train that person. So I hired a guy, the most timid person, writes effective stories. He's an aerospace engineer, right? Week one, what I did is I started Teams call. I recorded, I said, next 1 hour, we are going to talk yard automation. I taught him yard automation. I gave him keyword, gave him a week and said, go research. Gave him the name of the company's competition, right? The guy comes back after 1 week and says he was overwhelmed. So I gave him some more coaching feedback. And I gave him a methodology, how to research, take keyword. Second week, he went back, did the research, and what he came back with, I was like, this is what I was looking for. So I think, I've been on the receiving end. I joined management consulting, work with folks at PwC. People don't share, or sometimes when you step out, the leaders are. So you got to find your mentor, and it has to come from both sides. If you're in comp science, you have to reach out to the supply chain leader, said, hey, I want to learn yard automation, warehouse automation, what's happening, give me 1 hour of your time. And I haven't seen anyone who will tell you no. If they're saying no, they're not a good leader. So I think likewise from the ops side, they can spend time with a technology person, say, hey, tell me a little bit more about ML or AI so I can talk intelligently.
Yeah, thanks.
This is fantastic. I mean, we just want to add one point here, I think, to Dean's message, and as well as some of you, what you said. What we did with this panel also, when we discussed it, this topic came up, to bring Dr. Sriram from computer science. So he's the moderator of this panel. First time probably we ever thought of bringing a different faculty member from a different department, and there's value in it. I'm sure you're enjoying this discussion as well. Even the prep meetings, we had a good, and thanks Ashutosh for bringing the research component to the discussion, because I feel that, just like how the Dean was pointing to how we think differently and what we should do to change, the research component is always thought of as only for students who are doing graduate research and PhD. But today's expectations are even undergraduate students should know research. I mean, just like how you said it, you had to do some research to get to the bottom of how to use that technology for that application. Just wanted to thank you for that.
And then Sandhya, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
I can give my perspective of where we've solved it. So usually our customers at O9, our sweet spot is usually we have two buckets, a $1 to $2 billion company, and then we have the multi-billion-dollar companies like Nestle's and PepsiCo's of the world. Now, I think for one of the main reasons is how we are trained, and second, also it becomes cost prohibitive. So what I've seen in the larger corporations, I think we've solved this because there is value in utilizing or training these resources and utilize them against different divisions, because these major big corporations are like small sister companies in itself. So one of the biggest CPG providers that I work with, what they've done is they've created an organization that sits between IT and business, who are the owners of all the products in that ecosystem. Say you have a financial ecosystem. Today, there's not one company that has just one provider. You'll have a myriad of providers. So those guys, they usually train them as their roots or education or training is either technical or business, and they're the people who have a penchant to learn and upskill themselves. but there's an opportunity that has been created. Similarly, on our side, when we provide these services, we've been able to create for such larger clients, we've been able to create techno-functional roles who understand the technical aspect, but have been trained or because of their penchant can talk that. But majority and every service provider, be it Blue Yonder, O9, everybody, mostly it's a cost prohibitive option because we've all gone a offshoring model. But some of these biggers, they are willing to pay the price for that extra value, and I think we've been able to solve that.
Okay, thanks. I think that's about the time we have. If I have to just summarize this in one sentence, and correct me if I'm wrong based on whatever you've discussed, it's think big, but keep your fundamentals strong. I think that's the one message that I'm getting from all of you. And of course, also interdisciplinary being extremely important in the modern world. So with that, thank you all for your time. Really appreciate this. Thanks.
All right, and we're gonna do a quick 5-minute break. We scheduled 10 minutes, but it's such a engaging conversation. So take a quick 5 minutes. We'll see you guys back here 11:05 while we set up our next speaker. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Hans Christian Henbach, is a seasoned professional innovator and technologist focused on supply chain management. His experience in management consulting, technology startups, and senior operating roles spans over 3 decades and includes successful private equity-led turnarounds. Chris currently serves as CEO of Truckle, a software company that makes the management and monitoring of fleet incredibly easy. Chris sits on several advisory boards for supply chain, robotics, communication, and financial service startups, and is an advisor on supply chain, global trade, and blockchain to the World Economic Forum. So please join me in welcoming Chris.
Thank you very much. You can hear me okay? First of all, you should clap afterwards, not before. You don't yet know what you're up against. Thank you very much for having me today. And obviously, really good opportunity. What I'd like to talk about is the nature of innovation to some degree. We've heard a lot this morning, a lot of really interesting, inside stories, with Klaus talking about digital twins in warehouses, Everstream, right? The real-time event notification platform. The panel here was fantastic, right? This is a unique opportunity to get insights. And what I'm hoping to do is kind of give you as well a frame of mind, a frame of thinking about supply chain and thinking about the innovation that's currently going on. This is me, of course, as a speaker. What I'd like to do is start with what is innovation actually, and then talk about a couple of trends that we're seeing in the market today, and then bring it all together to what I believe the vision for the next 5 to 10 years is, which is that we're not just seeing autonomous trucking, but we're actually seeing autonomous supply chains, with everything being autonomous. Okay, so let's start with innovation. Here's a famous quote. So William Henry Preece, chief engineer of the British Post Office: "The Americans have need of the telephone, but we do not. We have plenty of messenger boys." Was he right or wrong? Probably pretty much wrong, right? The reason I bring this up is not to make fun of him. In all fairness, this person was born 50 years before the invention of the automobile. I'm bringing it up because we all say things like this. Every one of us is in the same position. All of us are at times saying things like, yeah, drones will never happen. They'll never fly, right? Autonomous trucks, forget it. That's never going to happen. Way too complicated. Start driving an 18-wheeler past the school zone. Good luck to you, right? Those are all things that we think, that we say. I want you to at least be sensitized to, we all say things like that, and I do, right? And I might even today. Another thing that's really interesting about innovation is it's often not recognized. When Edison lit up the lower half of Manhattan, the first time we used electricity in the world, this was reported on page 8 of the New York Times. This is an invention that's as big as the wheel, as fire, right? And this guy is on page 8, right? And the reporter writes about it and then says, you know, it actually wasn't that spectacular. What happened was that I just did my work. But where it really became interesting was at night, because I had light. Right? People had to discover how to deal with innovation, how to deal with something as game-changing as electricity, right? And that's really important to keep in mind. A lot of times we don't necessarily know what an innovation brings and how it's, you know, how it all fits into context. This is another good example. Does anyone know what this is, the box in the background? Any guesses? CPU? IBM, yes? CPU? Close. It's the world's first mobile hard drive. The year is 1954. This thing came with a chartered plane. It also came with its own forklift. And it had the capacity to store 1 MP3 song. When you look at this, could you imagine what we have today? Apple Watches, smartphones, our laptops, of course, right? Tablets. How many computers are in your car right now? The car that you drove to this event today? On average, 115. Every electric vehicle, it's 3,500. So this is just the beginning, right? And one thing we always have to keep in mind when we talk about innovation is that however it starts isn't how it ends, right? This thing eventually became smaller and smaller and smaller. Then we had, floppy drives. Then we had, obviously, whatever, USB sticks and so on and so forth, right? So don't judge something by what it is today. When the automobile was invented, the first person to drive in Detroit was in 1896, 20 miles per hour. The newspaper reported that the guy was pretty lively, and his biggest problem was dodging all the horses and the pedestrians, right? Nobody was used to it, right? Until the 1930s, we didn't have stop signs or driver education, right? Things always start very slow. Keep that in mind when we look at autonomy. Keep it in mind when we look at drones, when we look at artificial intelligence, machine learning, virtual reality, augmented reality. All those things will come together. But we are in the 1896 scenario right now, as far as a lot of that is concerned. Another one that's important to know, or at least for me, it's an important point to make. Here we have Gustav Mahler, arguably one of the most successful composers of all time. He 3 of his symphonies, usually by most critics, still rank in the top 10. In the early 20th century, he was interviewed by a journalist who asked him about his vision for the future. And Mahler said, in the future, tens of thousands of people will listen to music, live music. And everybody went, oh my God, right? At a time when 99% of the population couldn't even afford the clothes it took to get into a symphony, right? The tuxedo, the bow tie, the whole 9 yards, right? And so my point here is, Mahler was of course right. We have concerts with tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people. But he was also wrong. How was he wrong? We're not listening to Mahler. We're not listening to Bach and Mozart and Beethoven and Brahms, Chopin. We're listening to, obviously, rock music. We're listening to what is popular today. At the time, he was a rock musician, right? When he lived and worked. So we can be right and wrong about something, right? And that's really important. And something, again, to keep in mind, I might say things today where I'm right and wrong, or completely wrong, right? We don't know. Make up your own mind. That's one of the things that I want to get across to you today. One of the most influential thinkers on innovation was Schumpeter. He was a very colorful character, an Austrian by birth. He later immigrated into the US in the 1930s, taught at Harvard. He coined the term innovation and also separated from invention. The invention is when you conceive a new thing. Innovation is its market introduction. That's really, really important. I bet everyone here in the room has had a great idea, right? A eureka moment in the shower. Oh my God, I'm going to create a toaster with a radio built in. That's going to be great, right? And then, of course, you know, you get out of the shower and you think about, how do I start a company with that now, right? Everyone has these ideas, but what's important is not that you have the idea. I would be very willing to bet money that there isn't an idea that 100 people haven't thought about, you know, when you have it. Certainly true for me. What matters is that you act on it, that you actually do something about it, that you start that company. Obviously, that's really, really important. Another thing that he popularized was creative destruction. If you stay in your spot, if you're not willing to change, if you're not willing to adapt to the times will move on. Somebody will take advantage of your complacency and they will take your spot, right? So you have to reinvent yourself consistently. How many companies are still on the US stock market that were there in 1922? One company, right? TE, I think, was there. Was there earlier. IBM was early, PepsiCo, no, not PepsiCo, but Coca-Cola maybe, but not many, right? Companies come and go. We have to keep that in mind when we look at Meta right now, when we look at Google, right? When we look at Apple. They're huge today. But you know what, 20 years ago, we were talking about Microsoft being that big, right? Nobody was talking about Google, Apple, or Facebook, right? Companies come and go. And it's because of course, innovation cycles, right? And changing markets as well. All right, good. With that, let's talk a little bit about what's happening around us, right? Everything is becoming more and more intelligent, right? Our devices are becoming more intelligent. Everything around us, your fridge can order stuff for you based on knowing what you like to eat and based on basically forecasting what you're going to have for dinner tonight, right? One thing that's really important, of course, is everything today is software-based, right? Mark Andreessen said it in the Wall Street Journal a few years ago. Software is eating the world, right? You see it obviously here as well. We know everything about pretty much everything, right? You don't have asymmetry, information asymmetry as much anymore. You don't have the situation where you go to a store, you buy a car, right? And you come in there and you get actual advice, consultation from the person that's selling you the car, right? You come in, you already know everything, right? And it's just about figuring out how long you need to wear them down to give you the car at the price that you want, right? It's everybody is out in the open, and that's true for supply chains, right? What happens in your supply chain is more and more transparent. You know, in the words of management consultant Don Trapscott, if you're naked, you better be buff, right? That's really, really important. You have to have your act together. And so this is obviously something we see more and more. I'm always, you know, reminded of when I'm in a restaurant or something and you see people, you know, that couples that are sitting at a table and they're both on their phone, right? You know, my first thought always is, God, I hope they're texting each other, right? It's not someone else. They're not cheating on each other over dinner. But whatever it might be, but we are all getting there, right? And information and software is eating us, right? New work environment. Klaus didn't expand on it, but touched on it. For DHL, that's a huge thing, and we'll talk a little bit about AR in a little bit. Machines are increasingly becoming more intelligent, and also it's harder and harder to determine what is real and what isn't. You know, Google DeepMind, which beat the Go champion, Korean, they are now training the algorithm on a game called Diplomacy, which basically the goal of the game is to convince your fellow players to let you win, right? It's like Survivor in a way, right? And this is really interesting, right? The algorithm is learning how to socially influence the fellow players so that it comes out victorious. Right? At the same time here, Samsung right now is building sensors, is building avatars that form memories. You call, you have a problem, technically whatever it is, and the algorithm will ask you, well, you know, do you play golf? Yeah, I do. What's your handicap? Oh, it's 95. Not good, right? Then You know, the avatar will actually remember that the next time you call, it will ask you, hey, Chris, how's your golf game? You still played 97 over par, right? And it's, you know, it's basically, it's becoming less and less possible to distinguish what's real and what's not, right? In China, Xinhua News Agency is using avatars as anchors now. They're based on real people, but it's a computer. You know, our generation, my generation certainly will look at that and say that's pretty spooky. But you know, you guys, your kids will think this is the most normal thing in the world, right? That's the change that we're seeing. Obviously, there's also a great decentralization, democratization, if you want, of computing power. People are working on, Neurologic is working on actually using networks of computers to distribute AI so that actually you can now start coding AI, right? Obviously, the idea eventually is also that we're going to have natural language coding, right? OpenAI, which is probably the most advanced company in the world today in this realm, at least in natural language processing, is testing a Copilot, which is a program that actually codes software. You start writing a line of code, and it completes the next 4 or 5 lines. You write the next line, it completes the next 4 or 5 lines, right? And eventually, obviously, we want to, and probably will get to a point where software can create more software. You know, think about what Klaus said this morning, right? Really interesting with Everstream, right? Where now, or with a digital twin, right? Where now I have a platform that gives me a lot of real-time intelligence about what's going on with my trucks, my forklifts, my warehouses, my packages, my partners delivering stuff on my behalf, right? All that stuff is coming together. And now think about building a digital twin and then applying logic to it. Creating new code based on what you've learned, based on behaviors, right? I'm sure you guys at Blue Yonder are thinking about that, right? It's something that is too tempting not to do, right? So we will see more and more advanced AI and machine learning capabilities, and it's ultimately it's going to permeate our lives, right? It's going to be in every part of our lives eventually. We see the same in autonomous technologies here. Canadian startup Waabi, actually, they didn't start to create an autonomous vehicle. They simply just started to create the test cases that other autonomous developers need. When you think about autonomy, it's basically progress on a curve of diminishing returns. You know, that's why a lot of people failed early on, right? Because everybody, the first few steps were really easy for everybody. And it was easy to say, okay, I can get a vehicle to drive on a straight line, you know, and then I get that vehicle to drive a straight line using camera vision, LiDAR, radar. Now I can get it to make a left turn. That's very easy to do. But again, try driving an 18-wheeler past a school zone. Try to figure out whether a dark blob that's on your camera 150 yards away, you know, whether that's a plastic bag, whether that's a bomb, or whether that's a baby, right? You have to do that in near real time if you want to drive autonomously. So the problems become basically more complex and more complex and more complex, right? That's why a lot of the autonomous companies today are training vehicles in specific areas, right? Waymo, Zoox, etc. They're driving in San Francisco, but they're only driving around, you know, a couple of zip codes. That's it, right? Too simple. Driving here in Texas, Arizona, New Mexico is driving the same lane over and over again. A lot of these guys went into trucking because they're not encountering school zones when they're on the highway. So all those things are changing rapidly, but we're still a ways away from actually having universal autonomous driving. There are exciting things going on, right? People are using radar now to look through buildings. You know, you have a busy intersection in a downtown area. You have a high-rise building. You can't see what's coming from your right. The radar actually can. So you can actually use these technologies to see that somebody's barreling down the road, is going to crash into you if you take your green light, is going to slow your car down so that you don't do that, right? On the upside, there's a phenomenal amount of really interesting stuff going on. Likewise, what's happening, Tesla was the first one to do this, is we are seeing a change in paradigm between electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, and traditional cars. People today, OEMs today, are software companies. They're not hardware companies anymore. The old guys are really struggling with that. Volkswagen hired 10,000 developers in Germany. And they were still over 18 months delayed with their ID car, even with 10,000 people. Why? Because they don't know how to manage software developers. They know how to put screws into metal, right? And they know how the brakes work and the ignition works and all that stuff. They're very good at batteries these days, but they don't know how to write code. Thus, no car. Right? And that's what you're seeing today, is that we have this paradigm shift in trucking as well, of course, right? And you're going to likely see that some of the companies that are traditional and stay traditional will simply be left behind, right? A few years ago, I did some consulting work for a car company in California, and they basically had the question: okay, we know we're building an electric vehicle. The next thing we're going to do is we build an autonomous vehicle. What happens when we have autonomous vehicles? Cars. You and I and everyone around us isn't going to want a vehicle anymore, right? The cost of operating that vehicle, which, by the way, our cars stand for 96% of the time, right? But the cost of operating that vehicle goes from $1 to 35 cents. So am I ever going to want a car? No, I'm going to take an Uber or Lyft, whatever it is, right? I'll just pop in an Uber, and for a fraction of what I'm paying now for the pleasure of driving here, I'll get the same thing, right? When we don't have cars, how is the supply chain going to change? We're going to build cars that need to last 1 million miles. Every 4 years, I'm going to take the chassis off, I'm going to take the seats out, and I'm going to put something new on it, but we rejuvenate the same car over and over and over again, right? I have to figure out how to deal with battery attrition, but that's about it. So these guys are thinking about it from a software perspective, right? And from retrofitting vehicles over and over again, because we won't be driving many of them. So with that, a second area where I see a lot of innovation, and I see all this coming together, I'll explain at the end, but another area is real-time responsiveness. We live in more and more responsive environments, and we live in more and more information-rich environments. Here you see Toyota Woven City. It's currently being built. It's being built on a digital twin, by the way. So they first built a digital model of the city for 80,000 people. Then they're building the city, then they're moving people in, right? The idea ultimately is that you have people living in the future, right? It's going to be a real life, real-time lab, right? Where you are fully connected. Everything is on a ride-share basis. Your alarm goes off because the alarm knows that you have a meeting at 9. It knows how long you shower, how long you breakfast. It knows how long it'll take you today with current traffic to get to your meeting. And it's going to pick you up at 8:25. It's going to drive you here to UTD, UTD, and then you're going to be here 5 minutes before your meeting to have time to grab a cup of coffee, right? And then you go into your meeting. Everything fully integrated and connected, right? And that's what we are moving to, right? That's how software is eating us, obviously. We see a lot of real-time data in trucking today. Embark here, for example. They tie into the JBus of the vehicle. They can get about 1,500 sensor reads in real time. They can tell a vehicle that it's going to break down shortly, right? And that's ultimately the goal. For these developers, especially for truck developers, what it comes down to is that you have, on one hand, managing the asset. It's going to be different when you have an autonomous vehicle. There's nobody to help, right? How are you going to check whether there's 16 pallets on your trailer without a driver? You're going to have a camera in the back, right? What do you do if an autonomous truck breaks down? You're going to have to think about new ways of solving that, right? We get early warnings from the truck. We then we bring the truck to a halt somewhere. We fly a drone in with instructions and spare parts. We locate a repairman who's in the vicinity, who can get to the truck. And then, we marry the three, right? Broken vehicle, repair parts, spare parts, and mechanic. The mechanic repairs it. The old parts go back into the drone. The drone flies back to a depot. The mechanic goes home, has dinner, and your truck continues down the road, right? Totally different process from what it is today, right? We have to rethink a lot of these things. Here, Panasonic actually used 5G in Utah and Georgia. They equipped a couple of miles of highway with 5G sensors. So the point here is the roads are becoming smarter, right? Really interesting stuff. They obviously can detect accidents. They can warn you. They can slow down traffic, lower the speed limit and things like that based on knowing what's going on the road. Eventually, it's conceivable. We actually, at my company, we submitted a proposal a few years ago to Federal Highway Administration about a highway blockchain, where you basically leverage the highway as if it were a central bank fundamentally. The purpose of a central bank is to keep the amplitude of your economy within boundaries, right? To cut off the peaks and the lowest valleys, right? And what is the purpose of the Federal Highway Administration? It's road economy. It's road safety, right? It's preventing fatalities. What do they do today? 98% of what they do is they fix potholes. Right? So basically what we said is take a blockchain and, long story short, just think about it as if how do you actually manipulate behavior of drivers? When you drive to the university this morning, we can actually, we obviously collect tolls with 5G. Every road becomes a toll road, right? 164,000 miles of highway in the United States, 5,000 miles are toll roads today, right? You get 159,000 miles of free toll roads with 5G eventually, right? And why don't you put that on a blockchain and we actually not just charge you $12 for getting here, but if I see there's congestion, I can reroute you, for example, and I can pay you for that. I'll give you $8 back, or maybe I'll pay the $12 and I give you $5. And it's going to take you 15 minutes longer, but now I'm actually helping with road economy, right? I'm helping with making roads safer. So there are a lot of things that will be possible through this down the road, pun intended. Another thing that's really interesting is augmented reality. We've seen Facebook's glasses in cooperation with Ray-Ban last year. Apple is supposed to come out with something. I don't think they will, but at least they're rumored. But fundamentally, what's the interesting part about augmented reality? Devices go away, right? Apple is looking at this as basically disintermediating the phone. Right? They started Watch because they realized people were just, on their phone too much. Date night. Oh, I got to talk to Carl real quick. Hold on, right? And so they put Watch on your wrist so to monitor your health, and also to keep you from using your phone too much, right? With Glass, you can write emails by spoken text. You can display obviously all information on here. It becomes really interesting. You don't need your phone anymore, right? As long as you have a processor in your Glass. Now, for supply chains, that will be really interesting. If you're driving, obviously we can show you parking lots, we can show you gas prices, we can show you where you get the hot dogs that you really like and things like that. But of course, you can also now go into a warehouse and say, hey, Glass, I need SKU XYZ. And it'll pop up in red, right? And you see 3, you'll say, Glass, tell me which one is the oldest. And now it's 1, right? And then you can take in a material handler and pick it up. So that's really interesting, obviously. Industrial applications here, Niantic, where you can hold up a tablet to a device and it tells you how to maintain it, right? A broken down autonomous truck, for example, right? And here, Niantic, of course, is a spin-off from Google. They're also the people who built Pokemon Go, right? And They're actually the most successful game in history, right? They made $6 billion in 1 week. I don't think anybody there in the office is still interested in building industrial AR. They're all busy enjoying their money. But it was the game was started as a real-time test, right? Software test. They wanted to see how certain algorithms work in the real world, and they said, well, the best thing we can do is let's get 1 million free testers. Let's just put a game out there, and everybody will play it, and then we get lots of feedback for product engineering. An interesting one as well, Ubiquity 6, they allow for collaborative AR. Imagine we all have AR glasses. I could now throw a virtual object on the table, a digital twin of the warehouse that Klaus talked about this morning, and we could all actually look at it, right? And now we can actually start to simulate things. We can start to look at how specific materials flow in, flow out, and so on, right? And obviously, that's a capability that's closely related to everything else that's happening in supply chain, which I'm bringing it up here. All right, autonomy, Boston Dynamics, now Hyundai, funded by SoftBank. They have material handlers that already, do this stuff. And today, this machine is about as fast as a human. It's not as fast as what Klaus was showing, but obviously, they run 24/7. They don't go on strike, which in Germany and France is a big issue. They also, they don't take vacation, they don't get sick and so on. And the investment over time is phenomenal, right? Here, this is a local company, Anantak. They're here in Dallas. But there's a similar to Vecna, Sigrid, a couple of others with autonomous forklifts, tuggers, and pallet jacks. And this equipment has been deployed in very large corporations today. It's running, as Klaus said, moving from A to B isn't the challenge anymore. However, what he didn't say is there are huge challenges when you pick up a pallet. Think about it. What if the pallet isn't just right? If you pick up the pallet and it looks like this, what are you going to do to a shelf? You're going to run everything down, basically, right? So to fix the problem just of having a straight pallet is immensely complex. These guys have PhDs working on that stuff, right? Because it is really, really, really complicated. How to back out of putting a pallet down in a 90-degree angle is really, really complicated. Driving in a warehouse that has uneven floors, really, really, really complicated. Usually the equipment knows where it is based on the tire sensors, right? Based on revolutions on the tire. When you drive into a little pothole, what happens is the tire spins. What happens next is the equipment now thinks it's a little bit further than it is, a little bit more left, a little bit more right. Really, really hairy problems, right? Anantak solves it by actually working exactly as Waymo would, any other autonomous car company. They have LiDAR, they have not radar, they have LiDAR, and camera vision. And they basically see the equipment. The idea ultimately is that when you order forklifts, that the truck arrives with your shipment of forklifts, you open the truck, these things drive past you and start working, right? That's the goal ultimately. All right, obviously, robotics as a service is quickly becoming the dominant model here, where you just pay a monthly fee for for this equipment. We bring it into your facility, use 5 today, 8 tomorrow, no problem. We'll get you another 3. And Locus, which is probably the most deeply integrated into ERP systems and so on, they're leading the charge right now. Drones are probably a little bit further than most of us think, at least intuitively. But Zipline is a company that's already flown over 20 million miles. They just haven't done it here. They've done it in Rwanda and Ghana, and now actually here in America as well. But they have 20 million miles worth of experience on how to do this. One of the things that I find fascinating, you don't see it on this picture, this was before, but they had to figure out how to avoid collisions, right, in midair. Today in the United States, you have a so-called hockey puck around the vehicle, You need to have a 1.25 mile radius around the vehicle that's clear, right? And if not, you have to somehow duck and go somewhere else. Now they tried to use camera vision, didn't work. Radar lidar didn't work. All of these were too heavy, too expensive, too computationally intense to actually make it work on the drone. So they figured out a way to use sound. They now have microphones on the wings, and they can listen to what's going on in the air. They can take all the ambient noise out, and they can today tell you the make and model of what else is in the air. Not only do they see another drone or a plane, they can tell you it's a Boeing 737 and you know how far away it is. So the point here is there's a lot of innovation that's happening, right? Thinking back of the 1954 IBM hard drive, right? That was just the beginning. We don't know what's going to happen, who's going to invent what next. And until we do, we shouldn't give up hope, right? That's the whole point here. Of course, you also have Volocopter, which is flying 1,000 pound now. So we have small drones for last mile and package delivery. We have bigger sized drones for mid-mile deliveries as well. Obviously, in trucking, you've had companies like Einride that have been running trucks for about a decade. They also are on a vehicle as a service model, meaning that you pay $15,800 to onboard a site, and then you pay between $18,000 and $25,000 a month for the vehicle. You can't even put your own driver in it. First of all, there's no spot for the driver. But more importantly, all the vehicles are driven by somebody in Sweden, right? And these new truck drivers, right, they have 8 displays in front of them, 2 joysticks, and they run 200 trucks at the same time, right? Only focusing on vehicles that have a problem, an exception, or where something might be a little tight. Of course, we see other autonomous equipment quickly emerging. Caterpillar has driven 200 million kilometers in mines, similar to Einride. We're seeing the first autonomous bus in Edinburgh at the end of the year. Parallel Systems has a really, really interesting system. They basically put one of these things, or 2 of these things under a container, on each on one end, and now you have a train of 1, right? We don't need trains anymore. These are electric autonomous locomotives that drive the container where it needs to go. But you don't have to wait until the train is full, it's a mile long, and then it goes from A to B. You can run your container on tracks, obviously orchestrated with everything else as you need to. That's really, really interesting. We are seeing potentially new modes of transportation here. Hyperloop, the Port of Hamburg is currently building about a mile-long track to see if they can do drayage. Hyperloop drives at about 650 miles per hour. And what it would do basically is it would dray to anywhere in Germany, right? You could have parts on a container going to Stuttgart. They come into the port in Hamburg. Stuttgart is about 550 or so miles away. In 50 minutes, they're there, right? No truck, no train, no transloading. You get your container straight from the ship. An hour later, you have it at your plant at Porsche or Mercedes, right? Really interesting stuff. The project that I was invited to discuss about a year ago to actually have something parallel to the Panama Canal now, right? To run it across northern Latin America. All right, with that, let me maybe bring it all together a little bit. One of the things that I've seen over the last couple of years, and that's really at the key of everything I want to communicate to you today, is that we're not just seeing autonomous trucks or forklifts or material handlers. We are seeing autonomous supply chains. It's possible today, right? You have basically, think about it, you have materials coming off the line at a production site. Boston Dynamics robot takes them, puts them onto a cut. When that container is full, an Anantach or Vecna or Seagrade forklift takes that container to a landing pad, where a Volocopter drone picks it up, flies it to a switchyard, where 2 simple Gatik truck stands or Waymo truck stands, and basically is loaded by another robotic forklift. Once that truck is loaded, it barrels down from Chicago to Los Angeles, where now the process reverses, right? And now the stuff is shipped to local distribution centers. Eventually, you have a beehive. You have 200 delivery drones flying through the roof every 15 minutes, delivering your packages to households in the area, right? Technically, all of this is possible today. We're not seeing it, right? Nobody's integrated it. It would be too difficult to do, as you said on the panel. In one or two supply chains, in one or two processes lanes, you could possibly do something, but try orchestrating in supply chain, not going to work today. Technically, though, it is possible already. And that's the key, right? Is we're very close. Supply chain collaboration will play a huge part in all of this. Project 44 this week announced Movement, a new platform that basically allows all P44 users to pool and share data, right? Somebody has a run from Tampa to Atlanta. Someone else, another P44 user, has capacity in Atlanta or has freight in Atlanta that they need to run down to Jacksonville. They can now trade and avoid empty hauls, things like that. At Truckle, we've been working for 4.5 years on collaboration in supply chains, right? Fundamentally, in supply chains, everybody's siloed, right? Everybody has their own systems, processes, people, objectives at the end of the day. We've built a platform that lets supply chains connect in less than 60 seconds without APIs or EDI, right? Just very simple solution to a big problem. Blockchain will probably become a big part of it. When you think about it, the entire physical layer can eventually be automated. Are we going to hear words like, hey, has anybody seen my bill of lading on the printer? Very often? No, right? We're going to automate the back office along with the front, with the front line. To me, when I looked at it, we started looking at the scenario in 2018. Blockchain was the only technology that can actually make it work. It's an immutable ledger. What happens on the blockchain stays on the blockchain, right? It has smart contracts. I can automate processes. We've been, at Truckle, we've been discussing things like, why don't we pay drivers for performance? Today a driver gets paid 30, 90, or 60, 90 days later. Why don't I just pay him when he shows up at the point of pickup on time? 10% right now into your account using a smart contract, right? Then when you hit the first milestone of 3, another 10%, another 10%, another 10%. You get the freight to the receiving dock on time, another 20%. The other 40% or 30% I'll give you whenever, a week later or whatever it is. Whenever I've established that the freight actually is intact, that there were no damages and things like that. We're going to see a lot of changes through the automation that blockchain enables. Ultimately, what we looked at in late 2018 is that when you take autonomy and blockchain and something that a software that allows you to collaborate and coordinate all of what's happening in a given supply chain across companies, when you take all that together, we are commoditizing logistics. At the end of the day, we can treat logistics just like any other commodity, like French corn, Russian sugar, American pig bellies, right? And we can trade it as such. So we actually, we filed a patent on having a market for supply chain, where eventually you can go and say, hey, I've got $20,000. I'm going to buy 50 lanes from Chicago to Los Angeles, right? With an autonomous vehicle, maybe at 65, 55 cents a mile. And then as we get closer to November, I can sell 10,000 of those or 10 of those and so on and so forth, right? And I can actually trade capacity. The same for warehousing, right? So ultimately, the more we automate, the more it becomes fungible, right, and tradable. And that is our vision for the future in obviously many years, right? Timing is everything. And obviously, I have no idea what the timing looks like. We filed a patent in order to protect the idea for 25 years. Right? We hope that's enough. Good. So to bring it together, maybe 5 minutes, what can you do? To your question this morning, how do you bridge the gap, right, between technical and business, right? Functional or capability and systems. And so I wanted to give you at least a few thoughts on what you can do to better prepare yourself for all this stuff, right? It's if your head isn't spinning, I haven't done my job by now, right? I hope it is. Right? I hope that you guys are thinking about a lot of things. And again, I don't know if I'm right or wrong. It's not the point. The point is to get you thinking, right? To think about AR, to think about VR, right? What's going to happen to me? Someday, you may actually work in a fully virtual office, right? You go downstairs, you put on VR goggles, and you plop on the sofa, and now you're in a meeting in Singapore, right? An hour later, you move into a meeting in London, right? An hour later, you're in a meeting here in Dallas. At 12 o'clock, you take your glasses off, your VR goggles, and you go into the kitchen, you make lunch, you eat, and then at 1 o'clock, you put the goggles back on and off you go again. We're on to Moscow, right? That's, those kinds of things are all coming in some form or fashion. I have no idea whether that's what it is, but that's not the point. The point is, think about it, right? Stay on top, stay current, stay engaged, stay hungry for this information. So one of the things, obviously, that, and we heard it from the panel this morning, you have to look ahead. If you go out and you deploy technology by paving the cow path, you're not going to be very successful, right? Here, of course, we have Gretzky. The key to winning is getting to where the puck is going to be next. Don't look at the current state of things or the current way of doing something, right? I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people who have said, well, we can't do X. And it all had to do with taking exactly what they do today and putting a new technology on top of it, right? As opposed to thinking about, well, how do I improve my process? How do I cut things that I don't have to do anymore? How do I enable new strategic capabilities that I didn't have before? All those things aren't playing into the equation when somebody tells you, I can't, right? It's about how, not whether, right? And that's really important. Obviously, be aware that you will fail and fail fast if you do. Also, be flexible. The only thing that kills you is inflexibility. My idea is right, and my idea is the only idea. That kills you. If you're flexible, if you're adaptive, eventually you will be very successful. As entrepreneurs, as employees, as managers, as executives, right? Be aware that as soon as you go into battle, you're going to find that your plans are all pretty much cute, but also not very practical, right? You're going to have to adapt to the situation and work with that. Every technology project I've ever seen was like that. I've never seen a technology project that sounds like it's presented to you, right? Oh yeah, we went in there, we did this, and we got out. You know what? Everybody had their sleeves ripped off. Everybody had black eyes. Everybody was sweating, right? I'm sure you've seen your share of that, right? I have, right? SAP implementations, supply chain system implementations, and so on, right? It's never easy. So, but you will be very successful if you're flexible. Always keep your priorities in mind. Technology is nothing but a tool. The way you use technology is much more important than anything else. If you take a pad of paper and a pen and you give it to me, and you also give it to Ernest Hemingway, who's going to write a better short story? It's not me, right? Of course not. Although we use the same technology, right? Golf clubs, Tiger Woods and me, right? Who's going to be better? Well, I have a surprise for you. I have a 97 handicap, right? So it's always about how you use them. And start with your strategy. How is whatever you want to do, whether it's blockchain, whether it's AI, whether it's digital twins, whatever it is, how is that going to help your capabilities in the market? Is it going to position you better? Is it going to help you compete? Is it going to make your customers happier? And then from there, you define the business process. From the process, you start to look at which technologies can I actually use to do that. If you start with the technology, you're flying blind. That's what it comes down to. Of course, you also have to have a culture that supports it, right? If you go out into the workforce after your studies and you go to your boss and you say, hey boss, I have this great idea. And your boss says, well, not now. What are you going to do? You're going to take your resume, you're going to polish it, and you're going to run, I hope, right? That's not a culture you want to be in, right? The organization has to be willing to fail, has to be willing to change. If people are afraid of being embarrassed by saying something in meetings, you are in the wrong place. I guarantee it. not a company that'll be on the stock market in 10, 20, 50 years from now, right? I love this formula, O plus NT plus equals EOO, comes from Ericsson. Old organization plus new technology equals expensive old organization, right? That's exactly what it is. You're paving the cow path. All right, lastly, it's not all innovation is equal. We heard it a couple of times this morning, right? You have to develop the filters to identify who's an innovator and who's a pretender, right? Who's telling you something that's valuable and who's not, right? If people lead without reason, for example, without a vision for how something that they're trying to get you to use is going to be used, they're probably not a dolphin, right? And it's to your question, right? How do you bridge the gap between technology and business? My answer is very simple. It's you. You need to have 1 foot in business, 1 foot in technology. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter whether you're a programmer or whether you're a business person. You have to have 1 foot in each. Today, you cannot live in a silo. Those days are over, long over, right? So the same is true here, right? You need to develop the filters that allow you to identify what does and does not work, right? What is good, what isn't good. Sometimes you just have to educate yourself. Blockchain is a great example, right? Educate yourself today. You may not need it for another 2, 3, 5 years, 10 years. Who cares? But if you don't know what it is today, how can you make the decision when you're going to need it, right? You can't make a conscious decision until you actually know what it is that you're dealing with. So with that, thank you very much. Yeah.
We have time for one question before we go off to lunch. Anyone have a question? I'm gonna go over here.
Hello again. I have a bit of a two-part question. So you said at the beginning of your presentation where the innovation starts is not necessarily where it ends.
Yeah.
So my first question is, with all this technological advancement that's going on, are we creating technology to manage the supply chain, or are we creating technology to comply with where the supply chain is right now? And my follow-up question to that would be, do you think future-proofing the supply chain with advanced technology is the appropriate way to handle a dynamic field like supply chain?
Yeah. First of all, I'll go back to this. It's if we're creating technology that isn't solving strategic and operational issues, then we're basically village idiots, to put it mildly, right? So my hope is, and I know, right, a lot of companies are spending a lot of money, Blue Yonder, right? They're spending billions of dollars on creating really meaningful technology, right? And it's valuable, right? And it's based on talking to thousands of customers. DHL, the same thing, right? So you have a lot of good technology that comes into play. When you look at future capabilities, of course, there's going to be tests, trials, and errors, right? There's going to be stuff that doesn't work, but it was better to try it than not to try anything, right? And so generally, I would say we are creating technology that really helps with everything we do. And in terms of future-proofing, the only way you can future-proof it is to look into the future. It doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong or whether I am. What matters is that you build a kind of a mental model for what the future looks like for you, and then you work with that, right? And you adapt it, right? Somebody says, well, you know what, Chris, we had autonomous trucks now running outside, two simple trucks running outside of the three lanes that they currently do. They can actually now sense the environment. Great, I stand corrected. You know what, that's fantastic. But it's by all means, right? You build that into your model and off you go again. Your trajectory changes a little bit, but you still have the model. As a decision maker, you still have to think about, when am I going to bring in autonomous forklifts? Well, the short answer is now, right? An autonomous forklift saves 0.8 people, FTE per shift. On a 3-shift operation in a warehouse, it's 2.4 people every day, every unit. So they're easy, right? When do I bring in autonomous material handling equipment? Well, It depends how much you do, how many packages and parcels you manage. When do I bring in drones, right? Whenever they're ready, and so on and so forth, right? That's the key to future-proofing. But the point I want to make is that I'm not going to absolve each one of you from the responsibility of doing that. It's your responsibility to do it, right? I'm going to walk out of here the same way I came in, and you know, I couldn't be happier, right? The whole point is you need to take responsibility for how you deal with all that stuff, and that's future-proofing it. Thank you.
So they're still working on setting up lunch, should be done pretty shortly, but any last questions? Sorry, I was just said one, but now I'm saying two. Any other questions? Or where?
Yeah, hello. So I have this one question. So while working with an innovative idea, we should work on that idea looking at its mass implementation while knowing that we have the infrastructure to implement it, or like work on the idea where we are not aware that whether this infrastructure for this technology exists, but still it's a game-changing idea.
So really, really good question. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. So first of all, when you look at an idea, when you're an entrepreneur, there's a couple of filters that you run your ideas to. The first one is always, is it desirable, right? Do people want it, right? So if people want your idea, check, you move to the next one, which is it viable? Am I building a business or am I building an expensive hobby? If I can't make money with it, you're done. If you can make money, check. The next thing is it feasible? That's when we start talking about the technology. That's when we start to think about, well, now, how can I actually implement this? Let's say, for argument's sake, your idea is based on 5G. We already know we don't have, pervasive 5G yet. It's coming. Eventually, it'll be here. Eventually, it'll be fantastic. It's not likely that you're going to be constrained in upload and download speeds forever. That's just a temporary blip, right? It's a bump on the road, but nothing more than that, right? It's rather that now you look at how do I time my idea, right? And you make reasonable assumptions about how the network, the infrastructure is going to evolve over time, and then you build your product accordingly. To give you an example, and I'm making this up as I go. Let's say you build a technology that is vision-based AI. It's recognizing, let's say, things in the environment, just like DHL is doing with barcodes on, or whoever it was, I think it was Koi, with barcodes on trucks, right? Now you can't implement that for every car because today we don't have 5G everywhere, right? But what you can do is build a first product that goes into yards, right? And now you can say, well, this is really interesting. Where is this really useful? Today, seaports, right? Seaports are a complete mess. We all know that, right? You have the terminal operator, you have the port, the landlord, right? You have the drayage company, you have the chassis pool, you have the containers, you have the BCOs in the mix, you have 3PLs, forwarders, brokers, dispatchers, transportation companies, transloaders, all in the mix, right? A real mess. Would that be great for your vision-based technology? Tell me where my containers are at all times, just by leveraging the security camera feeds in the port. Wonderful, right? Now you have a product that you can build today with the infrastructure you have today, knowing that eventually your building capabilities that you're going to take on the road, eventually you'll say, you know what, this is really cool. I'm going to sell this, as Panasonic does already, to police departments, so that when the camera on the police cruiser sees your license plate, the cops actually get a notification whether you have a warrant outstanding or not. Really smart, right? And likewise, you can now do that for trucking, for example, or for insurance purposes. You could basically think about having cameras out in the field that tell insurance companies whether somebody needs to buy more insurance. And now you say, well, I'm going to actually present it to them on their smartphone while they're driving. Hey, Chris, you're going into an area that's 4 times more prone to have an accident. Would you like to buy extra insurance for $1.50? right? Your technology enables that because it recognized me on the road going into an intersection where that's the case. Boom, now you have a business, right? But you can't do that today, so start somewhere where the infrastructure is there and then build the technology that's complementary to what you eventually want to achieve. And fundamentally, that's what we did with Struggle. We knew autonomy was coming. We knew it was 5 to 8 years away. We built something that's still in the driver hand with a mobile app, but we also built a data sharing platform that we know we're going to utilize for the first time 100% with autonomous vehicles. Thank you.